silent screams. John sat alone in his room, staring at the blank walls. He couldn't hear the sound of the rain pounding against the windows or the howling wind outside. All he could do was sit there, trapped in his own thoughts. Born deaf and mute, John had learned to communicate through a system of hand gestures and written notes. But despite the challenges he faced in his daily life, it was the hallucinations that truly terrorized him. Ever since he was a child, he had suffered from vivid and disturbing visions. He would see things that weren't really there, shadowy figures lurking in the corners of his vision, grotesque monsters with twisted faces and sharp teeth. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape them. John had learned to cope with his hallucinations as best he could. He took his medication religiously and tried to keep his mind occupied with other activities. But deep down, he knew that he would always be different and outcast. One night, as John lay in bed, trying to block out the visions swirling in his head, he heard a knock at his door. He sat up, his heart racing, as the door creaked open. A dark figure stood in the doorway, its face hidden in shadow. John's eyes widened in fear as the figure stepped into the room, its footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. He was trapped, alone with this terrifying presence. And as it drew closer, he knew that he was about to face his worst nightmare. The figure reached out a hand towards him, its fingers elongated and bony. John recoiled in horror, trying to scramble backwards on the bed. But then, just as he thought he was going to be dragged off into the darkness, the figure spoke. "John, it's me. It's your sister Sarah." John's heart pounded in his chest as the figure stepped into the light, revealing the familiar face of his older sister. Relief flooded through him, and he let out a sigh. "Oh, Sarah. You scared me," he signed, using his hands to form the words. Sarah gave him a sympathetic smile. "I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean to frighten you. I just wanted to check on you and make sure you were okay." John nodded, still trying to catch his breath. "I'm fine," he signed. "Just having a rough night." Sarah sat down on the edge of the bed and placed a comforting hand on John's shoulder. "You know, John, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time for you to see a new doctor. Someone who specializes in hallucinations and other mental health issues." John's brow furrowed. He had been through so many doctors and specialists over the years, and none of them had been able to help him. "I don't know, Sarah," he signed. "I don't think it will make a difference." Sarah gave him a determined look. "I refuse to give up on you, John. You deserve to have a good life, to be free from these visions that haunt you. I'll do whatever it takes to find someone who can help you." John looked at his sister, touched by her love and determination. He had always known that she was his greatest ally, the one person who never judged him or saw him as a burden. And with her support, he knew that. As John looked at his sister, a sudden realization washed over him. The Sarah sitting in front of him couldn't be real, she had been dead for years. John's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Was he hallucinating again? Had the grief of losing his sister driven him to this point? "Sarah, is that really you?" he signed, his hands shaking. The figure, or whatever it was, smiled at him, its eyes glowing eerily in the dim light. "Yes, John. It's me. I've come back to help you." John's stomach lurched as he realized the truth. This wasn't his sister, it was something else, something evil and twisted. He tried to get up, to run and escape this nightmarish vision, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He was trapped, unable to move or make a sound. The figure leaned in closer, its breath hot on his face. "Don't be afraid, John. I'm here to take you with me. We can be together forever." John's heart pounded in his chest as he realized what was happening. He was being beckoned by a malevolent spirit, one that wanted to claim him for its own. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the sight of the creature in front of him. He had to find a way to break free, to escape this supernatural grasp. As the figure reached out to touch him, John summoned all of his strength and willed himself to wake up. And with a jolt, he opened his eyes to find himself back in his own bed, safe and sound. The experience had been so real, so terrifying, that it left John shaking and sweat-drenched. He gazed upon his companions who were sleeping soundly. He tried not to remember any of this, but his sister's image flashed before him vividly and continuously. He tried to muffle his cries so that the wardens could not hear him, and it wasn't hard after all. For more videos, subscribe to Fictionary.